I was standing at the kitchen counter going through Emma's backpack, the end of the day routine, check for notes from school, pull out the lunchbox, sign whatever needs signing, when I found the drawing. It was on standard white construction paper, folded in thirds the way kids fold things when they don't have an envelope. Crayon. The way second graders draw people, circles for heads, straight lines for arms, everyone about the same height regardless of whether they're a child or an adult. Emma had written names under each figure in her careful, uneven second grade printing. Left to right, Daddy. Me. Mama. Owen. Owen is my son. He's 5. And then, at the far right of the page, slightly separated from the rest of us by a gap that Emma had filled in with what appeared to be a house or a car, I couldn't tell, was a 5th figure. Taller than the others. A man, based on the way she'd drawn the hair. No label underneath. I stood at that counter for a long time. Then I heard Emma coming down the hallway and I folded the drawing back up and put it in the side pocket of her backpack and said nothing. That was October 9th. By February 6th my wife had moved out, I had sole custody of both kids, and the man in the drawing had a restraining order filed against him that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with what investigators found on his phone. But let me start from the beginning. I'm 43 years old. I've worked as a licensed plumber for 17 years, the last 9 running my own small operation out of Joliet, Illinois. 2 trucks, 3 guys, residential and light commercial. It's honest work and it's mine and I built it from nothing, which matters to me more than I can probably explain. Her name was Melissa. We met in 2012 at a mutual friend's wedding in Rockford. She was a bridesmaid, I was a groomsman for the groom's side, and we ended up at the same table at the reception. She was 28, working as a dental office coordinator, and she laughed at something I said early in the evening and I thought, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make that happen again. We were married in 2014. Emma came in 2016. Owen in 2019. For most of those years, things were good. Not spectacular, we had the usual friction of 2 people building a life together, money pressure when the business was young, the exhaustion of small children, the way a marriage can drift when you're both just trying to keep the household running. But we were fundamentally solid. Or I believed we were. Melissa had gone back to work part-time after Owen started preschool, same field, dental office coordination, but a different practice closer to home. 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, home by 3 so she could pick up the kids. The schedule worked. We'd built our routines around it. The first signs I explained away. She started going to a book club. Tuesday evenings, once a month, at someone's house in the neighborhood. I knew the names of some of the women vaguely, neighbors, school parents. Normal. Fine. Except in September the book club seemed to move to twice a month. Then in October there were evenings she was just out errands, a friend's thing, nothing specific. I was often on late jobs in the fall, commercial work, so the logistics of pickups and dinners got shuffled around and I didn't pay close enough attention to the pattern underneath the logistics. She also stopped leaving her phone on the charger on the nightstand the way she always had. Started keeping it with her. I noticed gradually, angling the screen away from me when she was on it in the evenings. I noticed all of it. I explained all of it away. And then I found the drawing. I didn't ask Emma about the 5th figure right away. She's 8, you can't approach an 8-year-old directly about something like this without either frightening her or tipping off the person you're worried about. I needed to be careful and patient. What I did instead was watch. I started paying attention to Melissa's Tuesday and Thursday evenings with a different kind of focus. Not emotional, methodical. I have a legal pad I use for job estimates. I started keeping a second set of notes on the back pages. Date. Time she left. time she came back, what she said she was doing, any detail that didn't fit. In the first 2 weeks, I had enough inconsistencies to fill half a page. The book club met on the third Tuesday of the month. I knew this because I'd heard her talk about it enough times to have accidentally memorized it. But on the first Tuesday of October, she'd been out until nearly 9. Not book club. A friend from work. Which friend? She named someone. I didn't know the name, couldn't verify it. She came home from those evenings slightly different. Not dramatically, not sloppy or guilty looking, nothing I could point to and say that's evidence. Just lighter. Animated in a way she wasn't always animated when she came home from a regular day. I installed a blink camera on the front of the house. I told Melissa I was worried about the package thefts that had been happening on our street, which was true. There had been 2 incidents in the fall, and the camera was positioned to cover the driveway and the front walk. Motion activated, recorded to cloud storage, accessible from my phone. I also put a Land Air Sea GPS tracker on her Hyundai Tucson. Behind the rear wheel magnetic mount. Took 40 seconds. I'd watched a video twice to make sure I was doing it right. I felt terrible doing it. I want to say that clearly. I was crouched next to my wife's car in my own driveway on a gray October afternoon, doing something I never imagined doing, and I felt sick with it. But I also had a drawing with 5 people in it, and one of them had no name, and that unnamed figure was standing next to my children. That changed my calculation entirely. Within the first week, the GPS showed me that on the 2 Thursdays Melissa was supposedly running errands after work, she had driven to a neighborhood in Plainfield, a subdivision called Stillwater Creek, newer construction, about 11 miles from our house. She stayed for between 90 minutes and 2.5 hours each time. Then she stopped at a grocery store on the way home. I drove past the address on a Saturday when Melissa had taken the kids to her mother's. A nice street. A tan colonial with black shutters. Mature landscaping. A black Ford Explorer in the driveway. I wrote down the address and drove home. I hired Carol Briggs. She was a PI operating out of Aurora. I'd found her name on a forum, same one I'd read exhaustively over those 2 weeks. We met for coffee. I showed her the GPS data and the address. She took the case for $750 and called me 6 days later. Carol was methodical and she was quick. 6 days was enough. The man who lived at the Stillwater Creek address was named Greg Holler. 46 years old. Divorced since 2021. Worked in commercial insurance, home-based. The black Ford Explorer was his. Carol had photos of Melissa's Hyundai in his driveway on a Thursday afternoon. Photos of her entering the house. Photos timestamped, GPS corroborated, everything clean and documented. She also found something that stopped me cold when I read it. Greg Holler had 2 prior restraining orders on his record. The first from 2019, filed by a woman in Bolingbrook, a former girlfriend, citing harassment and showing up at her workplace uninvited. The second from 2021, filed by his ex-wife as part of the divorce proceedings, citing threatening behavior during the separation. This man had a documented history of not taking no for an answer. And my wife had been bringing him into the orbit of my children. I went back to the drawing. I thought about Emma's careful crayon handwriting. Daddy. Me. Mama. Owen. And then the 5th figure with no name, standing slightly apart, next to what might have been a car. I called Carol back. I told her about the restraining orders. I asked her to keep watching and to be specific about whether she had any indication that children had been in contact with Greg Holler. She called me back 4 days later. On a Wednesday, one of Melissa's work days, the one she was supposed to be at the dental office, Carol had followed her. She hadn't gone to the office. She'd picked up Emma and Owen from school at the normal time, driven toward home, and then continued past our neighborhood to Stillwater Creek. Both kids had been in the house for an hour and 40 minutes. My 8-year-old and my 5-year-old had been in Greg Holler's house. I put the phone down. I sat at my kitchen table for probably 10 minutes doing nothing. Then I called a family law attorney named Patricia Ng, who I'd found through a referral from a colleague whose brother had gone through a difficult custody situation 2 years earlier. I told her everything. I sent her Carol's report, the GPS data, the photos, and the restraining order records. Patricia said, "I want you to come in tomorrow morning. First thing." Patricia's advice was specific and I followed it precisely. Do not confront Melissa. Do not let her know what you know. Do not give her any reason to alter her behavior before we have the strongest possible documentation. I followed that advice for 11 more days. 11 days of sitting across from my wife at dinner, helping Emma with her reading homework, putting Owen to bed, living the surface of a normal life while Carol continued surveillance and Patricia prepared filings. On a Thursday evening, Melissa came home at 8:15 from what she'd described as a work event. The dental office had a continuing education dinner. I was in the living room. Emma was already in bed. Owen was asleep. The house was quiet. Melissa set her bag down in the kitchen and came into the living room and said, "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said. "Sit down." Something in my voice made her stop. She looked at me differently than she had a moment before. "Sit down, Melissa." She sat on the edge of the couch. I had my phone on the coffee table and a folder beside it. Carol's report. The GPS logs. The photos. The restraining order printouts. "I need to ask you something and I need you to answer me honestly," I said. "Have you taken Emma and Owen to Greg Holler's house?" The color went out of her face. "Who?" "Greg Holler. Stillwater Creek, Plainfield. The Black Explorer. I know about all of it. I've known for 3 weeks. What I need to know right now, tonight, is whether you have taken our children to that man's house." She was quiet for a long time. Her hands were in her lap. "Once," she said. "Carol Briggs documented twice," I said. Another silence. "Twice," she said. I opened the folder and put the restraining order printouts on the coffee table between us. Greg Holler had a restraining order filed against him by a girlfriend in 2019. And one filed by his ex-wife in 2021 citing threatening behavior. "You brought our children into that man's house." She looked at the papers. She said, "He's not like that anymore. People change." "I'm not debating his character with you," I said. Patricia Ng filed an emergency motion for temporary sole custody this afternoon. A copy of the filing will be at this address tomorrow morning. She stared at me. "You can stay here tonight. Starting tomorrow, I'd like you to make other arrangements. The kids stay with me." She started to say something, I saw it forming, some argument, some explanation, and I held up my hand. "I have everything, Melissa. The GPS. The photos. The dates. Carol's full report. It's all already with Patricia. Whatever you were going to say, save it for your attorney." She didn't say anything else. I went upstairs. I checked on Emma, who was asleep on her side with her arm around a stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 2. I checked on Owen, who was a starfish as always, spread across his entire mattress. I stood in his doorway for a while. The next morning I made the kids breakfast. Owen wanted dinosaur-shaped waffles. We had them and Melissa left with a bag while they were eating. Emma looked up when she heard the door and then looked at me. Is Mama going somewhere? She said. She's going to stay with Grandma for a little while, I said. Eat your waffle, Bug. She ate her waffle. The emergency custody motion was granted within 48 hours. Patricia had presented the restraining order history, Carol's surveillance documentation, and the GPS record showing the children had been brought to Holler's residence. The family court judge ordered temporary sole physical custody to me pending the full hearing. But the thing that changed the entire picture, that turned this from a custody dispute into something larger, came from a direction I hadn't anticipated. When investigators from the DuPage County Sheriff's Office began looking into Greg Holler as part of the custody proceedings, they pulled his phone records pursuant to a court order. What they found on his devices had nothing to do with Melissa. Greg Holler had been under separate investigation for 9 months by that point, something Carol had not known and I had not known, related to a series of financial frauds targeting recently divorced women he'd met through dating apps. He'd take them to expensive dinners, establish trust quickly, then introduce investment opportunities, a real estate fund that didn't exist, a private lending scheme. 3 women in the western suburbs had filed complaints. Combined losses, approximately $180,000. He'd targeted recently divorced or separated women specifically. Women in transition. Women who were financially vulnerable and emotionally isolated. My wife, investigators concluded, had probably been his next target. She had access to our joint accounts. She had equity in our house. She was, from Greg Holler's perspective, a resource. Whether Melissa understood any of this or was simply a woman who'd made a terrible decision and gotten in over her head, I honestly don't know. I've thought about it a lot. I don't have a clean answer. Greg Holler was arrested in January on 3 counts of wire fraud. He was held on $200,000 bond. Melissa moved into her mother's house in Romeoville initially, then into a small apartment in Bolingbrook about 2 months later. She kept her job at the dental practice that was untouched by all of this, and I was glad for that. I needed her to be financially stable for the kids' sake, even if nothing else. The divorce was filed in November and moved relatively quickly given the circumstances. The temporary custody order became permanent at the full hearing in January, sole physical custody to me, Melissa with scheduled parenting time on alternating weekends and 1 weeknight per week. The family court was clear that the restraining order history and the decision to bring the children to Holler's home had weighted heavily in the determination. She didn't fight the custody outcome. I think she understood, by that point, that fighting it would only make things worse and that I wasn't trying to take the kids from her, I was trying to protect them. There's a difference. The house stayed with me. The financial split was clean, we didn't have hidden accounts or complex assets, just the house equity and retirement savings, divided straightforwardly. What Melissa lost that wasn't on any balance sheet, the version of herself she'd been building publicly for years. The school community, the neighborhood, the mutual friends. When the story became known, and in a town like Joliet it became known, the social realignment was swift and mostly silent. People didn't make announcements. They just gradually stopped including her. Emma asked me, about a month after Melissa moved out, if Mama was coming home. I sat down with her at the kitchen table, just the 2 of us. Mama has her own home now, I said. You'll see her lots. She loves you the same as always. Emma thought about this. Is it because of the drawing? She said. I looked at my daughter. What do you mean, Bug? I said. The drawing I did for school. Of our family. I drew Kevin too because he came to our house with Mama and he was nice, but then I thought maybe I shouldn't have drawn him, so I erased his name. She paused. I tried to erase it, but it was crayon, so it didn't really erase. Kevin. Not Greg. Kevin. I made a mental note for Patricia. Then I said, it's not your fault, Emma. None of this is your fault. You understand that? She nodded seriously. Okay, Daddy. Okay, I said. You want to help me make dinner? Yes, she said. Can we make the pasta with the butter? We can absolutely make the pasta with the butter, I said. The divorce was finalized in March, 5 months from the emergency custody filing to the final decree. Patricia Ng was thorough, fair, and she got it done without unnecessary drama. I'd recommend her to anyone who finds themselves in a situation they never planned for. Greg Holler pled guilty in April to 2 of the 3 wire fraud counts. He received 30 months in federal custody and was ordered to pay restitution of $180,000 to the 3 victims. The third victim's case was dropped as part of the plea. He'll be eligible for release in a couple of years, supervised. The restraining orders will follow him. It's July now. Emma finished 2nd grade with a reading level her teacher said was 2 years ahead. She's been going through a phase of drawing very detailed horses. Our refrigerator looks like a stable. Owen started soccer, which he is enthusiastic about in inverse proportion to his actual skill level, and watching him chase the ball around a field with pure joy and no particular effectiveness is the best thing I've seen in years. My business is having a good summer. 3 of my guys have been with me for 5 years or more and they're good men and good plumbers, and I don't take that for granted. Melissa sees the kids on schedule. The handoffs are civil. We don't talk much beyond logistics. She seems steadier than she was in the fall, has a routine, seems to be rebuilding something for herself. I hope so. For the kids' sake, I genuinely hope so. I still have the drawing. Emma's 2nd grade family portrait. 5 figures in crayon: Daddy, me, Mama, Owen, and 1 figure with an erased name that wasn't quite erased. I keep it in the folder with Carol's report and Patricia's filings. Not to look at, I don't look at it. Just to have it. Just to remember that sometimes the clearest picture of what's happening in your own life comes from an 8-year-old with a box of crayons and no reason to lie. Kids don't know how to lie about the important things. Not yet. I hope Emma keeps that for a long time.